Ideas podcast, and I'm joined by a phenomenal leader who helps other leaders communicate better. Thabani Mtsi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Excited for this.
Yeah. So, what introduced you to go more into communication and helping people communicate or overcome their fear of speaking?
Yeah, Mandile from the beginning. So, there was a turning point in my communication journey when I transitioned from primary school to high school. So if you can imagine, primary school, you're with people that you were with since a young age. You're highly socialized. You know them. You know who they are. You know their backgrounds. You know where their houses are. And we experimented a lot with growing up with each other. And so by the time I got to grade 7, I was comfortable in the space that I was in. So this was the primary that I was at, Emonti, colonially known as East London, called George Randall Primary School. So, I spent the first 7 years of my primary school there, grew up with the people that I was in preschool with as well. So that was fine, right? And when I got to high school, I then went to an all-boys school. Yeah. So new environment, new people. We're a bit grown up. There's a bit of maturing that's happening. There's, teenagehood. Yes. So there's that happening.
Yeah.
And where there was a sharp turning point that I realized, and I'll share why this was a sharp turning point. There were some other points before, but there was a sharp turning point where a friend of mine introduces me to, I'm at this all boys school. Yeah. Then some of my friends that I was in primary school with go to co-ed schools and all other schools. And so a friend of mine then says, dude, there is this young lady that's asking about you. I think she's interested. He sends me pictures and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've seen her before. Because I'd seen her in my cousin's yearbook. And I was like, yo, who's this?
Yeah.
Her and I had a bit of a conversation about it, but I didn't follow up. And so he tells me that, look, this person's interested in you. And of course, I'm like, this is fate. This is her. This is the one. And I say, yeah, set something up. Let's link up. We link up over the weekend. Mind you, I'm dressed in my best clothes. I think I stole my dad's cologne or something. But I'm ready for this thing.
Yeah.
She comes, I come, my friend introduces us and it's like, okay, you need to chat it up. Telling you. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I had absolutely nothing to say. Froze.
Yeah.
Nothing came out. And she was like, hey, boom.
Cool.
And I'm playing around. I'm thinking, the weather, but I'm panicking, legit. I've got nothing to say. So she said, maybe let's start walking. Maybe you'll cool down, So we start walking and still nothing's coming. I'm shaking, I'm having a proper, episode of sorts. So fast forward, 40 minutes later, 20, it felt like 40, but it was probably 10, realistically. My friend comes in and is like, oh, how are you two faring? And she says, yeah, this one is not talking. He's boring me. There's a line I'll never forget. She says, I was told you were tall, dark, and charismatic. You're just dark.
Wow.
My heart. My heart. So I think at that point, that was a sharp turning point that the way I responded to it was how I respond to most things. Get as many books as possible, ask as many questions, try and upskill myself because there's obviously a gap in communication. So that's when I started undergoing formal training, if you will, reading books, finding out things, asking pointed questions in an attempt to try and get, competent at this thing. And I call that the sharpest turn because I think I've always been introverted and I've never been, a conversationalist. In any and every space, I stick to myself. I'm in the background. I call myself a background kind of guy. And I'm not the loudest person in any room, right? I'm not one of those center of attention, commanding the whole room types of people. So I've always been like that, but I've never had to face that before because I was socialized with the people I was in primary school with up until the sharp turning point. And the journey began, and I've been obsessed with communication since that point.
So what other experiences that helped you hone into it, doing it more professional to help others overcome that fear? And what opportunities did you see in that moment or after that journey of that sharp turning point? that you realized, nah, this is my fine tune?
Sure. So after that sharp turning point, you can imagine some of the content I was exposed to, you know, and I took some rabbit holes along the way. I know a lot of people will be familiar with some of the pickup artist content that a lot of young men at the time were consuming and trying to better themselves, right? You know, I took that route and read a whole lot of books, how to win people, and how to win friends and influence people, a whole bunch of books. And so you can imagine that because I'm reading all of this stuff, my eye is now fine-tuned to see how people are interacting, the loudest people, how they're interacting, how they step into the room, what are they doing that I could adopt to become less awkward, actually. It's not more of anything. Just become less awkward, to become more comfortable in social situations. And so to speak then to the opportunities, I then developed an eye to observe social situations, people. I also think it's part of nature. You know, there's the nature nurture part of it. I also think I'm just naturally an observant person. I listen a lot. I am always looking out to see, you know, what's happening here, what's happening there. And I think part of that was informed by the number of backgrounds I grew up in, but I'll touch on that a bit later. But as I went through, I've got knowledge and I'm seeing these things, right? I'm seeing that, oh, so-and-so is commanding attention because of how they use their voice. So-and-so is commanding attention because of how they use their body. So-and-so is commanding attention because of how well they tell stories. And so with that theoretical foundation and me consistently trying these things out in certain spaces, in new spaces that I felt somewhat, okay, I'm here once, I'm never probably going to be here again, so it's time for me to try out these new tricks, see if they work, and if they do, I integrate them into my life. And then I started seeing, I'm noticing things that other people are not noticing, right? And I'm asking questions that other people are maybe not comfortable asking, or other people are noticing but they're not saying. So like tense situations, I'm quick to pick those up. If a situation is tense, I'm like, no, something's off here, you know? So I've always been quick to say, no, this is tense, let's address it, what's causing the tenseness there? And then of course the response that I got from people as a result of asking those questions, conducting myself the way I was conducting myself on the basis of that theoretical knowledge and that experimentation, then showed me that people aren't as well versed on this topic as I would have thought they are. Because of course when you're on the outside, you think that everyone else is fine, right? Everyone else is laughing, everyone else is chilled, and you, having an internal experience, think you're the only person that's awkward in that social environment, the only person that's uncomfortable, the only person that's a bit weird when something happens and you're like, I don't quite know what just happened. You think you're having a singular experience. And when I started having conversations and asking those questions, I then realized that, no, Bandile is going through the same thing. He's asking himself the same questions. You know, there are a lot of people who are asking themselves the same questions, and then I was like, okay, there might be an opportunity here. And then I started sharing some of those things with some of the people I went to high school with. Because, and I don't know if there's how factual this is, but there were a lot of us who, because we were in an all-boys school, speaking to women or girls was just a tough hurdle in general, right? And we'd often have conversations of, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And so I was then using both the book knowledge and what I was experimenting with, putting in inputs, right? And so I was like, no, man, people are asking these questions. People want to know these things. And so I started then playing around with not training or coaching people, but just contributing my knowledge within the social realm, right? And then move over to university. I'm somewhat comfortable in the skill, right? So me being comfortable in the skill doesn't mean I'm comfortable in social situations. I probably still have the level of discomfort, but now I know I've got the skill of communication, so I can communicate. I can ask questions, I can contribute to conversation, I can be social, right? Without feeling that sense of comfort. And then when I got to university, I then thought I was drawn then to leadership training and facilitation and all of those things, and there was a clear gap there. You know, I had people who said, I don't want to run because I'm going to have to deliver a speech. And I'm like, you're a phenomenal leader. You're phenomenal. Your thoughts are refined, they're nuanced, you're smart, you seem to have a good vision. And this one presentation that's 5 minutes, is going to stop you from stepping into a leadership position. And so I was like, there's a clear gap. People are struggling to communicate. And so it started off as me guiding some of those leaders and saying, okay, what are your challenges? What's the struggle here? I want to do this. That okay, let's go through it. Let's practice it. Let's run through it. And then I came across, organizations like Toastmasters.
Yeah.
Came across organizations like the transformation office within the university structure, and I started experiencing, a lot more of people who needed this guidance, and I stepped in and positioned myself to serve.
Yeah. So from those experiences, right, you said you connected with people who have the similar thought processes, with social anxiety, or the fear of feeling uncomfortable because everyone is laughing. You have to laugh.
Yeah.
So what are the top concerns in your experience that are like common denominator across different groups that you really tackle and say, okay, cool, there's a fear of freezing. So what leads us to freeze and how do we overcome that as a first step?
Yeah. Let me unpack that question a bit more. So are you speaking now because let me first paint the spectrum.
Yeah.
There is one-on-one talking, which is more conversational and all of that. And then the more people you add, then sort of the more the format becomes different. So let's say at this end of the spectrum, there's one-on-one communication. I'm talking to you, we're having a conversation. Then you scale that up, you add more people, you maybe add a camera, you sort of widen the audience, and then you move to, there's a group of us, we're in a group conversation, so everyone is contributing, and then you move to, there's one of me and there's 50. I'm trying to then frame this question. Are you speaking, what are some of the common challenges on a one-on-one, or in a group setting, or in a one-to-many?
I think in different stages. I think, as you say, like I know for myself, as an introvert, I had to grow into being uncomfortable talking. We hear more, we learn from talking and engaging more in relationships.
100%.
So I think it's easier for us to converse, but as you say, as you add, for example, a camera, the anxiety comes in. The thoughts that like, I wonder who's watching.
Yeah.
So what do you find are the common, I think, as we transition to different states of communication?
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the base level, the research says at a primal level, whenever you're standing, I don't want to say exposed, whenever you're standing in the midst of uncertainty, now let's track back when maybe we were hunting for things. You needed to be acutely aware of your surroundings because that then contributes to what you're going to catch and how safe you are. So any level of uncertainty then should heighten your fight, flight, or freeze, or freak out. It should heighten it. So you're unsafe. Now let's quickly fast forward and draw to a public speaking instance, for instance. You're standing in front of probably strangers, right? Because no one has a problem public speaking in front of their family. Because there's familiarity, there's some sense of safety depending on the family dynamic, but very seldom people are, let me rather paint that differently. Seldom are people uncomfortable speaking in front of people they know and they're familiar with and they're safe in that environment. It's not public speaking, then you're just talking to friends, right? Whether they're sitting down, whether you're standing on a podium, if it's them, then you feel somewhat safe. When you change elements, you add a stranger. It contributes to the fear. When you add stakes there, so let me highlight four causes for the fear of public speaking, but I think these also apply to one-on-one conversations. So the first one is the situation.
Okay.
So where am I? Am I talking about new content? Am I speaking to a new audience? How much is this setting? How uncomfortable or how uncertain is this? So new topics, new people, new ideas, new concepts are going to cause some sense of discomfort. So that's the first one, situation. The second one is skill, your level of skill and your perceived skill, right? If you perceive yourself to be a competent communicator, you will do better than someone who doesn't perceive themselves to be as a competent communicator. So it's an internal story you tell yourself, especially around your ability to communicate and the safety therein, right? You tell a different story when you're speaking to your family or your friends or a safe space than when you're speaking to executives, for instance, right? So there's a skill, and then there are your thoughts in the moment. What does this mean? What are the stakes? If I make a mistake here, what does that mean for me? If I fumble this, what does that mean? So there's skill, there's situation, there's skill, there's thoughts.
Let's look at these things.
So situation, the situations will always vary. And so whether you're in a conversation one-on-one, depending on what the conversation is about, I'm going to feel less nervous for a conversation that's not a conflict than I am going to feel if it's a conflict. If I'm coming here to confront you about something, of course I'm feeling some type of way because the situation dictates that. So the way I use my voice is not going to be the same. I'm not going to come to you and say, well, depending on what type of person in my relationship to conflict is, right? I'm going to use the voice that dictates what my relationship to conflict is in the one-on-one conversation. And the same thing if you're on a stage and you think, and you think that you're being evaluated, the situation changes versus when you think, it's a bunch of people I know and I'm comfortable with. So that's the situation. Then your skill, which is what I specialize in, I think you can always ramp your skill up.
Yeah.
And I always say that your competence as a speaker is no one's at zero.
Yeah.
Right. No one's not competent at all. No one's negative. You're on some spectrum of competence. And what you can do is increase that slider. Yeah. And of course, nature, nurture again, some people based on how their proclivities or where they were raised, they'll change. Some people are more extroverted, more open to experience and just more enthusiastic. Right. And so they'll have a bit of an advantage. Some people were placed in situations where they had to speak a lot more than others, which is speaking to the nurture part. So in terms of that slider and the level of competence, they would have been a lot further than someone who had a different background and has a different has a different DNA makeup. That's actually the fourth one. Yes. It's physiology.
Yeah.
Is the fourth one.
Okay.
It's who are you inside, right? Are you an introvert, extrovert? Are you open to experience? And by the way, I think introvert, extrovert has less of a relationship on your ability to speak. And I think your openness to experience has more of a relationship because your openness to experience speaks to your comfort with uncertainty, your comfort with ambiguity. So if you're comfortable being in ambiguous situations and uncertain situations, whether you're introverted or extroverted, it just speaks to how you charge up for social situations. Of course, an introvert, I'm also an introvert, by the way. If I'm not charged up and I show up to speak to you, I'm going to be compromised early on. But if I charge up, then I should be equipped. But then my openness to experience and my comfort with discomfort and ambiguity will actually dictate how well I treat a public speaking situation. So physiology, nature, nurture, and then it's situation, right? And then it's your thoughts, and then it's your skill level. Those are the four things that across the board, if you address them, you should at least become a more effective communicator, with skill being the biggest lever.
Yeah.
If you improve on your skill anyway, you can go anywhere. You can put me in any situation. Yes, I can adjust my nurture and nature to some degree, but if you ramp the skill up, then you're at a much better standing.
So how do we get that skill muscle? I think, for example, let's say you come fresh from varsity now, you've just completed your degree. You want to access that opportunity, but you're struggling to sell yourself because you're never taught on how to communicate. You've been taught about consuming knowledge, consuming so much information to build a basic of a skill of going into the labor market, right? So how do we sell ourselves? How do we communicate our skill set in that environment when you don't want to go and pick between 1 million people in a hole?
Yeah. Well, first, you follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm not kidding. Yeah, follow me. That's the first thing because I've got good tips. Yeah. And then secondly, more practically, I think there is there's one first understanding where you are. I think as cliche as it may sound, admitting that you've got an incompetence in being a communicator is the first step. If you don't want to admit it, like, I'm fine. I get nervous every now and then when I have to present, but I'm fine, right? And I've seen many people who are in denial. Many people who say, I'm fine. I don't need any coaching. Don't need any guidance. And this is not even me selling services because this is when you're passionate about something, it infiltrates into your conversation.
True.
So if I hear someone saying, my boss, when I speak to them, I just can't. I'm like, no, let's unpack that. Yeah. Let's unpack that. What's that about? Mm-hmm. And then I see that there's actually a communication incompetence here. Mm-hmm. But people are like, no, I don't have an incompetence. I speak with you all the time. I'm like, of course, you're safe. You know, we know each other. We're comfortable. Mm-hmm. So first step is admitting that you've got an issue. And then I'm going to break it down into the elements. You know? So admitting that you've got an issue. And then before I go into the elements, highlight where is this issue the most prevalent? Like where is it bothering you the most? Is it at work? Is it in your personal relationships? Is it in family? Is it with strangers? Is it in, and this is important because the approach differs, right? And you'll find that there is a very accurate mapping between where it happens and the safety that you feel in that space. And if it only happens at work and everywhere else you're comfortable, then you need to see someone about that. Yeah. You know, there are people who are professionals at addressing your relationship to work and the health and how psychologically safe you feel in that environment. And that really contributes a lot because a lot of getting competent at the skill is making mistakes. Yeah? Trial and error, trying things out. The more you try them out, the better you get. But if you don't have the environment that's safe enough for you to try things out, then, it's like a catch-22. You want to improve, but you're not safe enough to have the runway to improve. And so if the workplace, for instance, let's use that for an example, because I think that's the most practical. You find that in the workplace, you don't feel safe. Né? What are the pockets within there that are safe? Né? So now you're trying to find a place where you can practice. Né? So know yourself. I have a problem. This problem is the biggest pain point of this problem is at work. I don't feel safe at work. Where do I feel safe at work? Oh, and I'm going through my journey here as well. When I talk to a sister in the kitchen, we laugh it up. Like we really connect. And I'm able to have a conversation with her. I wish I could take that energy to ... complete. The boardroom. Yeah. My meetings. When I negotiate interviews, when I negotiate for salary, right? So I now have a point of reference within the workplace. And I know how I show up when I'm talking to Usistani, for the sake of the example. I'm laughing out loud. I'm, jubilant. Like I just show up as my truest self. I use my body. I use my voice. I use my face. But when I'm in a meeting, then,
Yeah.
So I now at least have a reference point that I can map that to. Then it's mapping out the steps of how can I transfer Thabani in the kitchen with Usistani to Thabani in the boardroom with Usistani, right? And then there's a mapping that you can do, and I'll give a tool that you can use practically. In public speaking, there is the tools that you're working with is your voice, is your body, and it is your eyes, eye contact, and your ability to connect with people. So it's those three tools that you're working with that are on your person. Or at the very least, these are the things that people look at when they're listening to how strong of a communicator you are, how compelling your message sounds. You're working with those three. Yeah? So I'm asking myself practically, in the kitchen with Sister Andy, how does my voice sound? Am I speaking with a low tone? Am I excited?
Yeah.
Am I, how does my voice sound? And I'm just wondering, let me not go too technical. Just how does my voice sound? And by voice, the volume of it, Am I loud? How does my laughter sound? Am I, and then in the boardroom, am I, right? So that's the first one. Voice, how can I match that voice? Then you ask yourself in the boardroom, what elements can you steal from your kitchen self and bring to the boardroom? Maybe I say, you know what? I want to be a bit louder. I think my volume is too low when I'm in the boardroom. or I want to increase my frequency of speaking. So in a meeting, I speak twice. But in a conversation with Mr. Tandy, I'm speaking 70% of the time. So in the boardroom, just increase it to 30%. Then the following meeting to 40%. Then the following meeting to 50%. Ne? So that's mapping your voice from the kitchen to the boardroom. And then it is your body. How does my body look? How does my posturing look? When I'm in the kitchen, I'm throwing my hands around, I'm hitting her, I'm like, get up, and, I'm relaxed, right?
Yeah.
But when I'm in the boardroom, I'm to myself, I'm at my computer, and typically, when we are safe and free and open, our bodies open up naturally.
Yeah.
And when we are unsafe, you close up, then you to yourself. And of course, the safest position is the fetal position.
Yeah.
And you just want to sit there in your head. That's what you actually want to do. You want to sit there and just rock yourself.
All your organs.
And rock yourself to sleep and be like, it's okay, okay. And self-soothe. But when you're safe, you're open, you sort of want to laugh out loud, you want to open up your body language. Transfer some of that through. How do I look like in the boardroom? How does my posturing look like? And I'm not talking power poses here. I mean, am I comfortable in my body when I'm inside that boardroom? No. What steps can I take to be more comfortable? Okay, I want to sit up. Let's start there. I want to use my hands a lot more. Maybe when a question is being asked, instead of saying, I've got a question, I want to pick my hand up, right? It's a micro movement that moves you towards being more competent. So you've moved the voice, you've moved a bit of the body. Then it's eye contact. Comfort levels increase eye contact. The more comfortable I am with you, the more eye contact I'm able to make with you. This can sometimes be tough because culturally, you're sometimes taught
don't look
at adults in the eyes, which is fine. Yeah. I think it's fair, culturally appropriate, and, wanting to give reverence to that. And I think it's fair to say that the mode of operation, at least in the workplace, is different to the mode of operation in a cultural background. And you need to be able to be dynamic in that way. So if your comfort levels are compromised when you look down in the boardroom, just your eyes a bit more. Maybe if you don't look at anyone, maybe just try and look at a few people every now and again. And how you can do this practically, start by looking at people when they speak, because it's easier to look at someone in the eye when they're speaking versus when you're speaking. So when they speak, just try and look them in the eye. Then so-and-so speak, you look them in the eye, so-and-so speak, you look them in the eye. You're practicing bit by bit.
How to engage.
Yes. And then over time, you then incorporate that when you're speaking, you look people in the eye. So you've transferred your voice, you've transferred your body, you've transferred your eye contact. You do that long enough, you are becoming a more effective communicator. And you'll see in how people respond to you. You'll see that when you contribute more in a meeting, and contributing more in a meeting can even sound like hopping onto a meeting first online and saying, oh, hey, everyone. Then people say, hey, how are you? Good. And just take the step and say, even if you're not leading the meeting, this is the powerful line. I see people haven't joined the meeting yet. Let's wait a few minutes. You've been invited to this meeting, but you can practically see that this meeting has 50 people that are supposed to join, and there are only 3 of you there. Say that line, use that line. Every meeting, say it, practice it. And what happens is, then people start responding to your, you say, yeah, let's just wait a bit. Yeah, people always do this. Anyway, so you then get into the conversation. Then you now know my conversational game in a meeting is going up, right? I'm able to use my voice, to throw my voice into the space a lot more. I'm more comfortable looking at people in the eye. I'm more comfortable using my body. Then naturally you'll start coming into yourself. More and more will start coming into yourself. So I think as a start, people can use that as a starting point. And to sustain that, we can chat about what some of the sustaining practices are over time. But as a start, as someone who says, I'm struggling to speak at work, those should put you in good stead. Try those consistently every day for 3 months and come back to me and tell me they don't work.
Yeah. So I think now you're touching on something that also gets confused a lot, because I think most of the time we encounter such freeze moments. Okay, we have to think, I need more confidence. Do you find that is common, like people misconstrue confidence for communication, or is the two go hand in hand?
Yeah. So, and with every workshop, that's what people say. I ask, I've never been in a workshop where people don't say. I say, okay, I'm going to train you how to public speak. What are your expectations? And they say, I want to be more confident. And I say, I left my confidence shot back in the car. Maybe, so, but the myth there is I'm going to be confident, or I communicate because I'm confident.
Okay.
Ne? It's switched around. I'm confident because I communicate. Ne? And the bridge between those two is competence.
Okay.
So you're not confident, at least for me. Let me talk about myself. I'm not confident in my ability to communicate because I'm a confident human being. I'm confident in my ability to communicate because I'm a competent communicator.
Yeah.
I've trained how to use my voice. I've trained how to use my body. I've trained how to connect with people using eye contact. I've built that competence.
Yeah.
And as a result, you can put me in any situation. I might not know the answer. I might not know what we're talking about, but I know I have the competence to say, sorry, I didn't hear the question. Please ask the question again. Or I'm not well versed in what the topic we're speaking about. Maybe provide more context, right? And I think you are correct. People do switch these around. They think that confidence and the ability to communicate are the same thing. But confidence is the result of being able to communicate, being competent at communicating. So, and I often say, or I often ask the question, they say I want to be confident. I'm like, want to be confident in what? They're like, oh, I know, yeah, like as a person. I'm like, the reality is, if you call me to do a surgery, I'm not confident. I'm like, no. No, I analyze businesses for a living. I'm an engineer. I don't slice people up. So I'm not confident, actually, in performing surgery. And there are a lot of other things that I'm not confident. I'm not confident in my ability to dance. I'm questioning that in my head because I back my dancing, but other people think that my dance moves are whack. Yeah. But, I'm not confident in that. But in my ability to communicate, I'm confident. Right? So ask yourself what you want to be confident in. And if you want to be a confident communicator, build your competence. And building your competence is brick by brick, element by element, voice, body, eye contact, hand gestures, and your ability to listen. That's you building the competence. And then you'll find that when you've got that competence, there's no reason why you wouldn't contribute in a meeting when there's something you're uncertain about. You're like, no, man, I missed something here. I am able to unmute and say, no, sorry, let's track back. I missed this, that. Not because I'm confident in my technical capability. I know that I'm competent in, I've listened, I've comprehended, and there's a gap for me. And I'll be able to convey that gap effectively. I'm not going to ramble. I'm not going to ask something that hasn't been spoken about. I'm going to communicate effectively that which the gap. So it's competence. Competence is the thing that people should go for, and confidence will come as a result.
And do you feel that when we ask for help, for example, in these situations that we find ourselves in, how do we overcome the fear of shame in asking for help or asking a question that the presenter has probably touched on, but you're still catching up to that concept?
Yeah. A lot of it is experimentation.
Yeah.
And I say that because I think we overstate how shameful asking questions are. I think we overstate how a lot of people are like, I didn't want to ask a question because it was going to be stupid. Stupid question. I think we overstate how people evaluate what stupid is. And also, I must say this, I think we overstate how much people care.
Yeah.
People don't care. I promise you, and I've experimented and played around with this. I've deliberately asked a stupid question.
Yeah.
Like, not a stupid question. Let me not call it stupid. I've asked a question that if I was listening, I wouldn't have asked that question. And then I try and gauge. People are like, no, you ask a question that I don't even know what question you asked, right? So because we've got this gallery of people in our minds that are watching every single thing we do with notepads out of money, why would Bandile say that, right?
Yeah.
We've got this gallery of people, and then we overplay the stakes of us asking a question. And this is not to say that every situation is laissez-faire, it's chill, you can sort of shop, whatever. It's not true. It's important that you're able to give reverence to whatever situation there is. So if you're in whatever forum that you're in, it's important that you listen. It's important that you try and take notes and you play back what's been spoken about and be able to know the gravitas of the situation that you're in. Né? And I think it's also important that you realize that people don't care. People don't listen that attentively. People listen to ideas more than they do to words. If I were to ask you to play back the sentence I just said now, no one is ever able to play that back because people don't listen to, oh, you said this and that and but. And the thing that I always point out, and I think I'm going to do this for the audience as well, I've got a thick lisp, like it's thick, but people aren't able to hear that until I tell them. So if I was self-conscious about that, I think, oh, let me not speak because people are going to be thinking about how, you know? But I'm like, also, they don't care to pay attention to that stuff. So the micro detail that we think people are paying attention to is not there. And so that shame that you might feel, I'll challenge you to experiment with it. Whenever you feel like, let me not ask this question, it might be a stupid question, ask it. And then query after you've asked it, how high were those stakes, you know? And again, cautioning here, for instance, in the world that I operate in, I'm in the consulting world. Yeah? In client meetings, I ask significantly less questions that, no, I'm lying. I ask more questions in client meetings. I ask more questions that are pointed at clarifying what they're saying, but less questions about my work and my competence. Yeah? But if I'm in a meeting with fellow colleagues and someone says, yeah, the CRM is, I'm like, oh, what's a CRM? You know, I'm not going to ask that in a client meeting because I know that I'm supposed to know what a CRM is in a client meeting. And because I know that if I throw that in as a question in a client meeting, then it's going to, then the client is going to be like, this guy doesn't know what a CRM is, right? So it's looking at the situation and giving it the reverence that it deserves. And then just asking the questions. The safer the environment, the more questions you should ask. Yeah? And then be able to see how high are these stakes here? How high are these stakes? And stakes are not, and people make this mistake. People think audience size is a stake. It's not a stake. Like the number of people in a room doesn't make that meeting high stakes or that situation more high stakes. Yes, it contributes to how nervous you feel. It contributes to your level of anxiety because, again, there's more ambiguity, right? With 2 people, there's less ambiguity than there will be with 50 people. Yeah? And the room for judgment and all those other things. And there's just more ambiguity. But that doesn't mean the stakes are high. It doesn't naturally mean the stakes are higher. So before you ask the question, have a real conversation with yourself. You can even do this before a meeting or forum.
Yeah.
And I give actually this as a tool to some of my students. I'll say, write down 5 questions that you're going to ask in every meeting. They're like, 5 is too much. I'm like, then do 3. So before the meeting starts, you know that you've got a 3 question quota to put your voice in there and also to see and recognize that the stakes typically aren't as high as we think they are. They really aren't. In what I've seen. So that shame is not, the stakes aren't as high as you think they are. And unfortunately, most of us realize this in our 80s.
Sure.
have you heard how disrespectful 80-year-olds are?
Yeah.
Because they've got all of this pent up, then they're like, I'm just going to go unhinged, you know? And so that not caring comes later on in life. And sometimes it's misplaced and it's displaced because they can be very rude and toxic. But the point is, try out and test the waters and then say, ooh, okay, maybe that was a bit too much. So this is the zone that I need to play in.
So in terms of relationships, right? So how do we communicate better with our people that care for us? And how do we ask help? I mean, you find, for example, when you look at mental health statistics, most of the strategies that happen around mental health fallouts is the lack of vocalizing help, with suicide being an aftermath of a lot of dangers that still plague a lot of societies. How do we communicate with loved ones that, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, this is how I can connect better with my partner, for example, or this is how I can communicate my need in this relationship?
So I wanted to give that one some thought because I think the first layer, and I've noticed in my life personally, where it's important that you know who's in your support system first. And I say this because, one, I need for you to know that
You're my support.
That you're my person. Right? You can't be my person and you're just my person to me. Because when I tell you something and you don't respond with the love, support, follow-up that I need, it's going to decrease the chances of me doing that again in the future. And if I do that with 10 people and then I get the same response, then the belief that forms in my mind is that when I speak to people, they don't respond. But the truth is, those people don't know that they're your people. Because I think your people will know. So I think I want to put that out as a caveat before. And then I'm going to move to the communication side of things. In any communication experience or instance, there is the expression and the perception. And I'm a big fan of over-communicating. If we're in relationship, I come to you and I let you know, look, there's a bit of I try as far as possible, especially with loved ones and those that are close to me. I try as far as possible to be as outright and direct with what it is that I'm feeling and possibly what support I might need. And if I don't know what that support is, I can say, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I feel compelled to share that ... So as a go-to, so I start off by having that person know that you're my person. And when I'm in trouble, I'm expecting to show up. Are you consenting to that?
Lifelong commitment. How far do I go?
and if they say, no,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I've had some of those conversations. Some people have said, you're a bit intense. Like you're a bit intense. I don't know if I can. Then I'm like, fair. At least it's clear. So that having that honest conversation of knowing who's in your corner. And then when you go to that corner, realizing that there's what you say and there's what they perceive, the expression and the perception. And trying to have those be as close to each other as possible. And how you can get those as close to each other as possible is by over-communicating and being as explicit as possible. So, and this takes a leap. And obviously people don't start from the same points. Some grew up in families where sharing wasn't a thing. Some grew up in families where sharing your problems with other people wasn't a thing. Which is why that first step is establishing a safe and secure
support.
Someone called it a secure attachment, and to attach and to latch onto another human being is a massive responsibility. One with, when you consent to doing that, you're in essence saying, it's not I'm giving you my life, but I'm giving you a heavy influence in my decision making. And then setting those people up in concentric circles as well. I don't know where I heard this recently, but knowing that when I'm having a self-doubt moment, this is the person that I can go to. right? And if I'm having, I need to jump over this hurdle moment, this is a person I'm going to. And the importance of that is the way you place those people. There's some people in my life who are just a say it like it is type people. I'm not going to take anything less. You're making excuses. That's actually the person I'm thinking about. That's their favorite phrase. That's an excuse. What's going on?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not going to want to go to that person when I'm feeling tender. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm feeling tender and then you tell me that, I'm like, yeah. And then
making excuses.
Yeah, and then they unmuted me. Then they're like, yeah, no, you're making excuses. That's not the counsel I need there and there. I'm going to need someone who's going to say, oh, tell me more. How did that make you feel? Okay. And then once I've contextualized all of that, I can then go to the making excuses person. I'm thinking about, how do I confront this? Then I say, yeah, I'm going to send them an email. And then they'll say, no, you're making excuses. You're being passive aggressive or whatever. So, knowing those people and your relationship with them, then of course knowing yourself and what you respond to when. I think setting those as primary foundations. So again, to summarize, you have a consensual support system. The people know that they're your people. You place them in accordance to what and how they can serve you, and over-delivering on the communication when you speak to them, and then just being aware of the relationship that you have with them. And that then should dictate the communication terms. And when I say that, there are some people, for instance, that I can't swear in front of, right? My mom.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, I had a If she asked me how my day was, I'm not going to cuss. I'm going to say it was a tough one, And then she'll respond in a motherly way or whatever. But with some people, I can easily say, they'll call me and I'm like, I don't have time for this now. Leave me alone. And they know that it's a call for help. They know that I'm in trouble. And then they know how to communicate. They know, okay, he's just done this. Let me call immediately. Or let me pop a message to say, look, I'm seeing you in a state. Didn't appreciate this. You don't speak to me like that. And I'm here if you want to chat. So now they know, now I know those people, when they say that, I'm not going to be like, what the hell? Who the hell are you to talk about your feelings when I've got mine? And so the terms of communication are then dictated by the relationship that exists and how transparent you are, how forthcoming you are, how honest you are. I think all of that then plays there. So that's a long-winded answer to that question. It's all about relationship and safety. True. It's all about relationship and safety and the consensual terms of engagement. Those are so important to have conversations like that. How do you want to be spoken to? For instance, I don't do well with I need someone to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Here's a perspective. Here's a perspective. Here's a perspective. Here's a perspective. I really like that. But depending on where I'm at, if I'm down, don't give me perspectives. Just give me a hug and say it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to say I'm right. Don't lie to me also. Don't say, no, you're right. They're wrong. Let's move forward. Because I'm going to be on no. I know that I'm probably not right. Yeah. So I know how, and I've had those conversations with certain people that, Thabani, I appreciate your input. I think this is not sincere. Like, what are your thoughts? And over time, you then see the people that are willing to delve into their thoughts. And those are like, no. And they'll use a high-pitched voice even. No, there's nothing. You're fine. Then I'm like, okay, maybe I should cut this relationship. It's not working. It's not serving the both of us. The person's not able to be honest with me. But if you enjoy and appreciate and are served by that, then seek those people out and move forward with them accordingly.
You earlier touched on you going back to the boys' school that you mentioned earlier, helping other men rethink their mindset or change that denialism about how they talk about women specifically or other groups. How do you feel that the state of mentality among men is towards, given the rising GBV, given there's so much almost anti-other human life existing narratives? How should men approach that, who are struggling with that mindset? How do they approach a better state in that?
Sure. By healing first, eh? I think, cliche again, hurt people, and unhealed wounds bleed on people, unfortunately. I've never come across someone in a healthy state that will be unkind, that will be rude, that will be belittling, that will be abusive. I don't think I've come across someone who's in a healthy state and is comfortable with who they are and knows where their trigger points are. I've never met someone who's aware and that's been rude and troublesome. With that said, the healing is the first part, and drilling into that healing journey, the reality is we all have scars that we've amassed over time, and you then become what you grew up seeing, either consciously or subconsciously, and you then react and act in the world. You show up as that. Yeah? And if you're not aware and you don't know that those landmines, those triggers are there, you then end up projecting and you hurt people. So I think at the core of it is healing. People need to heal. Any individual who, I've also never heard of someone saying, or of abuse just existing in isolation. Someone saying, no, I just thought, let me just be rude. I just thought, let me just, out of the blue, I was fine. I was just sitting, Bandile sat down, and I thought, let me discriminate.
Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
It's always a reaction to something. And there's a very twisted, sick cycle around oppression and, transferring it. There's a very sick cycle of when you've been, and I think at the core of it is just the insecurity. I don't feel safe. I feel attacked in some or other way, be it by your existence, by your confidence, by there's something that you're imposing that's making me feel unsafe. Insecure. Yeah. So I'm directly mapping that lack of safety to an insecurity because you're lacking security, and we all experience this. I think, unfortunately, men have gotten there's another cycle there in that it's almost like you feel big feelings, but you never know where to take or how to address those big feelings. I'll give you a simple example. And this happened to me personally over a longer period of time. Like, I no longer, and this is a miracle.
Yeah.
I think it's a big transformation. I no longer react to taxi drivers on the road when they do their things.
Wow.
And for me, it's miraculous because when I used to drive taxis. So my driving skills have been, let's say, tainted by some of the practices that are from there.
Yeah.
So when they do that, I sort of understand the mentality. It's almost like here's a situation that needs taken advantage of. This person is slow. This person is not focused. Like they're just not on the clock. I'm on the clock. I'm busy working here. I need to make my money. And you're getting in the way of that. So let me disrespect you, or let me step over you. Let me walk all over you. It's bullying, actually, what they do. It's actually bullying, what they do and how they treat the rules of the road. Let me bully you and let me get what I want to your detriment. Now, because I've been a taxi driver and I've unfortunately done that to other people, I now know the mentality or the approach that they use when they do that to people. So when they did this to me, I was like, who the hell? Who do you think I am? Right? And again, it's exactly that loop. I realized that my intention of hurting is so that I can secure myself, put myself in a better position. When that's done to me, I know the intention behind it. And so I personalized it. I made it about myself. And I'll always, without fail, when there was a taxi driver on the road, the antics I'd pull. And it's not even rolling the window down or shouting. It's like, okay, no, it's fine. I'll show you. You come in front of me. I'm going to spend the rest of this afternoon to ensure that you get to your destination 5 minutes later. I can be late, it's fine.
Yeah.
But you're not getting there because you've just done what you've done to me. And through healing, I've realized that, no, man, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
You know? They're doing it. Yes, it is an inconvenience to me. Yes, it puts me at risk. Yes, it compromises my flow, right? Because if someone quickly cuts into you, there's a quick shock, you know, and there's that quick burst of energy, that fight, flight, or freeze that comes in, or freak out that comes in. But when I quickly caught that, I'm like, no, I'm projecting because I feel disrespected. I feel belittled. More importantly, I feel unseen, unheard, unvalued. Oh, what's that reminding me of? All of those situations, especially, for instance, social situations where I sort of adopted,
humiliated, you know.
Yeah. Like I'm in a social situation, everyone's having fun and I'm trying to get my voice in, but no one's seeming to, or I step in and feel like,
and then they move on.
Anyway, you know?
Yeah.
So in that micro environment of the taxi cutting in front of me, all of those feelings are coming in. And the narrative I'm telling myself is, I'm not worth being seen. I'm just not someone who's worth considering. And this person is not considering me because the story is I'm not worth being seen. And then I project. But when I caught, I was like, it's not my business. Of course, I get pissed off. Then I'm like, me engaging in this thing with this person, it's not going to solve anything. It's not going to make me feel like I'm enough. It's not going to make me feel like I'm lovable. It's not going to make me feel seen. Maybe in the moment, it's going to make me feel seen and heard. And then I can be like, yeah, I shouted at them. It's not going to make me feel more valued.
How was your experience as a taxi driver?
It was interesting, hey? Yeah. It was really interesting. We used to do it over the holidays. So I wasn't a full-time taxi driver. Yeah. It was like a side hustle that I did when I was in school holidays. And we used to drive longer distances from Elalini, which is the villages, to town. And there always used to be another, we used to step in for our uncle who was the driver. He'd sometimes be like, you want to learn? And of course, when you're growing up, you're like, yeah, I want to learn how to drive. Of course, yeah. And then we'd hop onto those trips and he'd let us drive. And then, of course, we're growing up, we're very impressionable, and we learn some of the practices that they have, you know, the shouting at the passengers, the yelling on the road, the cutting lines, even some of the lines that we regurgitated. Like, oh, this one is sleeping, you know? Oh yeah, here's a sleepers in front of us. Let's just quickly, you know? So yeah, that was my experience in driving taxis. It isn't as elaborate as I would want it to be. It was very short-lived over certain holidays, but I definitely adopted a lot of, negative traits in that time. I also adopted quite positive traits. I would even say more positive than negative, but of course it's those negative ones that have then not served me as time has gone.
You know, with the economy and its titters right now, you know, everyone is looking for a recovery. You find a lot of people still cannot afford. If you look at, for example, the average basket of, you know, people receive incomes that they can't even afford to go to work, even if we rely on a public transport system. What would you say how the taxi industry or government or the economy as a whole can work together to communicate solutions in that situation?
Oh, yeah, my master's research was about that. Yeah. It was speaking about how the government and the minibus taxi industry could conspire to make the user experience the most conducive. And that's a question I still ask myself to this day. I don't have the answer to it. I think what I found was there is because I mapped out the relationships between, so there's the owner, the driver, and I'm looking at the people that are involved now. There's the owner, there's the driver, there's the commuter, and then of course there's the government and the support staff that are around the taxi industry. But the core ones that showed the strongest sort of ties and relationships and dependencies is the owner, the driver, and the commuter. The owner requires a certain amount of money at the end of the day or the week, depending on the agreement they have with the driver. Typically, the drivers that drive don't own the vehicles. And so they're both chasing target and trying to get their salary. And of course, the commuters are what make the business run. The customers are it. If the commuters don't pay, there's no business. There's no running money. What makes the situation tough in South Africa is exactly what you're referring to, that level of dependency. People's financial situation doesn't allow them to have the optionality to use other modes. So in transport science, those are called captive users. They don't have the optionality to use either a bus, a Uber, or they don't have those either ors.
Without extra luxuries in a way.
Yeah. It's taxi, you're captive to the taxi industry. You have to use it. In Cape Town, unfortunately, the train was the other alternative, but the trains have since been, they've since been compromised. And so they left to the wilds of the industry, which is why when the taxi industry stops, the flow of money from people
stops as well.
There's no food on the table. So when you look at that relationship, at that dependency, it then causes a power dynamic of sorts. And all the way from the owner has a power dynamic they have with the driver, because of course they pay their money. Then the commuter, there's a power dynamic between them and the driver because they don't have any other alternative. There also is some power dynamic that advantages the commuter in that the drivers need the commuter. But I think if we were to look at the percentages or even, look at the contribution, people need to get to work. They don't have other alternatives. They don't have personal vehicles. They have to use the taxi and their time frames to it. So it's not like you can sit at the rank and say, if you're not rude, then I'm not going to hop into the taxi because someone else is just going to step into the taxi. So I know it doesn't answer your question, but what I found with the research was that there are power dynamics that are long standing. And then when it comes to the industry and the government, and I no longer consider myself as an expert in this because of course there have been developments over the years. If we look at the industry has never been under the government. The relationship between them has always been like this. There's always been rebellion, even how the industry was started.
The church and state.
Back in the apartheid days, the industry started by illegally, transporting people from the city centers to the township. There are regulations that were put, I think they were meant to only put 4 people in, but then that was going to be economically viable for them. So they shoved 8 people in and that served the people that are on it because instead of having a trip that's going to take 4, it's going to take 8, which means more people get to go to their place of work in the morning. So if you look at that early dynamic between the industry and the government, there's never been we're aligned, we're on the same page. It's always been government needs them to contribute to the economy, so they have an upper hand in that regard, but also they still wanted to maintain their autonomy and their sense of self, I guess, sort of these mavericks of business. And that still permeates the industry to this day. And I'm not as close to it now, so I don't know what the most accurate, stance is, but I sense that, there's still some reconciliation that needs to happen there.
An alignment,
Those two have never been aligned. And so long as those two are not aligned, the commuters are going to suffer.
And I think speaking about suffering, we've also seen almost a spillover also into the Uber or the share riding platforms that have also emerged not just recently in South Africa, but for a long time. And we've seen in different parts of metros, taxi owners and taxi drivers just fighting Uber drivers.
That breaks my heart.
How do we challenge that? Like at the end of the day, as a citizen or as a user or rider or passenger, You are left helpless and you powerless in a way because you don't have the techniques, you don't have a recourse to go about.
Yeah, that really breaks my heart. That really breaks my heart. And again, it's back to insecurity, right? As a taxi drivers feel insecure with Ubers coming in.
Yeah,
they
because
feel
it's a
like
subtraction of income.
100%.
It is a subtraction of income.
I don't know.
Is it just
actually?
Yeah.
I don't know if
because it's a different market.
I was about to say I don't know if the person who contributes to an Uber is as much of a contributor than your typical, and I'm sure they'll aggregate themselves. I haven't done the research on this, so I'm speaking under correction here. But I wonder how much market share Uber really takes away from the taxis. I genuinely wonder, especially given that you hear stories about them abusing Uber drivers that are going to drop people off at the taxi rank. You know, like you don't know where that person comes from, don't know where that person is going. They're getting dropped off. They're getting dropped off for you to gain business, but they still insist on abusing them. So I really wonder, and I'll be curious to hear what the results of that research were to be, what the actual market share that Ubers are taking away from taxis.
So speaking now, going back to communication, you already touched on, I think, when we first spoke about coaching and the importance of going for professional services in a way, like coaching, sponsorships, finding a sponsor, for example, at work who can elevate you and build you that competence that you want to elevate next to. How would you describe those as a quintessential toolkit? I mean, how do we access these services? What is the value in them? For example, going to a coach or going to a mentor, going to a sponsor to help me with various needs.
Yeah. So as a caveat, I think the power of coaching, training, mentorship, having a sponsor is the whole idea of it's almost like you can suppress the 15 years that someone took to amass a skill in 3 months, in 2 weeks, right? So that's the first gift. And I always encourage people to, and I'll tell you why this is in a moment. I always encourage people to do your own research, scour the internet. And as a matter of fact, everything that I talk about is on the internet.
Yeah.
I study communication. I don't come up with communication techniques. Yes, I come up with techniques based on what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've experienced, and I'll package it in a way that's going to be digestible based on the queries that I've got the advantage of having a wide data set of knowing this is where people get tripped up. If they've got a bad start, they're going to struggle continuing. So what tool can I add there to ensure that they overcome that hurdle of a bad start? So my years of experience have given me that advantage, but I always encourage people to scour the internet and find ways to proactively improve it themselves, because by the time they get to someone like me, I know they've put in time. I've unfortunately had people who have come to me because they've seen my services and they're like, no, this is affordable. And I've always wanted to acquire the skill. And then we work and they just don't have the will. I can give you the ability. I can give you the skills. I can equip you with the skills. I can't give you the will. Unfortunately, I can't, and as encouraging as I can be and as enthusiastically as I can speak, I can't sell you to you.
Yeah.
I just can't. You need to buy into willing yourself to do the hours, to do the activities, to show up every time, and then get yourself over the line. And I find people who have undergone, they've read some books, they've looked at some things, working with them, it's a lot easier than working with people that haven't done that. So I always encourage people, look on the internet. And it's as simple as 5 tips on how to become a public speaker. You'll get thousands of hits. Read up. So it's reading, it's practicing, it's putting it in, and then it's tweaking based on that practice. Then the loop continues. So that's the first caveat that I want to put. And then again, back to the point and how important the coaching and the training is, and just to quickly distinguish between what coaching and training is. So training is me to a group of people. Ne? So I'm training a group of 15 chartered accountants or a group of 25 graduates. Ne? And so, of course, because of that format, it's going to be a lot of input, and then we'll put time aside for them to practice and to run through it. It's not as tailored. The coaching is more one-on-one.
Yeah.
You reach out, we look at your communication ability, your level of competence. We go into detail to where the hurdles are. And then I also then go into the background. What kind of family did you come from? How was your voice growing up? Are you a firstborn or your lastborn? How's the family dynamic? What's your relationship to conflict? What's your relationship? So I then do a deep dive to understand the person that's you, so that I know what some of the hurdles are. Because it's no use me equipping you with skills. And then, for instance, to go back to the earlier conversation we were speaking about, you're like, I've got all the skills now to use at work. And then you don't feel safe at work, you know? So in a one-on-one instance, I can then go through, okay, you don't feel safe at work. Let's look at psychological safety and let's work with that. And then it becomes more life coaching adjacent, juxtaposed with communication. And of course, the core of it is to try and get you to a point where you're able to communicate effectively, but it's embedded with other techniques and tools that I use. Whereas with the training itself, it's purely communication, both from a time standpoint, because there's normally a limited period of time, and then just for the volume of people that we have in the room. We don't have the luxury of going in depth with every individual. Although you gain the insight that's come from all the data that I've got and all the people that I've encountered, they typically, common threats, why people are scared of public speaking or even communicating one-on-one. And so the power of coaching is that you get to gain the value that I've amassed since I was, a 13, 14-year-old. And I've used those and I've weaved those now into products and packages that you can then, as a client, gain from.
So looking forward now, like taking back stock of today's conversation, what are you keeping with you, and what are your highlights that you're going to remember from this conversation or from today overall?
Yeah. I think first, thank you.
Yeah.
This was fun. Thank you for having me on your platform. And I think I also want to honor the fact that you've entrusted me. Right? You've got an audience that loves you. And now you've brought me in and you've exposed me to your audience. Thank you for entrusting me with that. So I really am grateful. I want to express my gratitude for that. I'm appreciative of that fact. And then secondly, I think you've made me see how, and again, I'm someone who thinks about communication all the time. And I often have conversations through the lens of communication. And having this conversation with you has shown me how widespread it could be. I'm thinking about the chat we're having about insecurity and how one's ability to communicate can actually foreground that insecurity, and how the lack of safety permeates throughout, actually, and how the core actual ability to communicate is based on safety. If I felt threatened by you, I probably wouldn't have had, a conversation. I wouldn't have been this comfortable. We wouldn't have had the conversation that we had. For instance, something as small as if we had a notebook saying, a notebook would have been fine, actually. If you had a scorecard and you're like, and before the interview, you're like, okay, I'm just going to rate you while we talk this to see how much of a fit you are to the audience. That would have increased my threat levels. I would have thought, now I'm being vetted. Now I'm being checked out and tested. So, that would have contributed to my insecurity, would have lowered my level of safety that I feel. It would have compromised the communication that we would have had and the exchange that we would have had in this conversation. So I think I'm taking that away, the importance of safety and security in any communication instance. And again, the importance then of using some of those levers to increase that safety and communication. Now that I step into this space, knowing that I trust my level of skill, I now know whether there are cameras here, whether there aren't, whether there's a live audience here or not, I know my skill. And I know that my skill has served me in various instances. And I think it's going to serve me here. Ne? So I've got the skill intact in the situation, and my physiology and my makeup is really going to influence the rest of the conversation. So yeah, those are some of my key takeaways from this.
Yeah.
But thank you for trusting me.
No, thank you, because you've also taught me quite a lot from this conversation. I learned, I think, more than anything about the power of knowing yourself more to be able to speak better. You know, knowing what your limitations are, remembering the encounters that you've had in different frames to give you feedback of like, okay, this is what triggers me to be destructive in my communication, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that was quite an eye-opener, you know, like just giving room for different possibilities to unravel. I would say, and stepping back and saying, why am I feeling insecure? As you said, like, for example, in the taxi incident where drivers just try to disrespect you almost.
Yeah.
Holding yourself back and actually resonating more with the impact that you want to create. So thank you so much for just giving us nudges of wisdom, nudges that we can use. And everyone else, this was Thabani Mtsi, and thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.